enjoy operating a layout like a miniature logistics system. I'm totally into, car cards and, dispatching and stuff like that. So we went to a bunch of train shows and, had just watching what's going on down here, seeing who's involved and what kind of things are going on. And then I went to the Beaufort Model Railroaders had a display at the library. Turns out they've been doing these Christmas displays for 28 years. So every Christmas, every December, about the third week of December, they get a bunch of people to come in, put up layouts for the public to come in and see. Usually it's a Christmas theme. One of the things I observed that drove me a little crazy was kids will come in, and they've all been accustomed to Thomas the Tank Engine or Brio trains or Lego trains. And they come in and they see these trains running around. The first thing they want to do is put their hands on them. It's like, what do we all say? It's like, please step back, don't touch, look with your eyes, not your hands. I thought about it, it's like, that's really not a good way to encourage a future generation of model railroaders. If they've got it in the back of their head, I can't touch this, but I can play with my cell phone anytime I want to. We're not encouraging them to become active in the hobby. So I thought about it, I said, what can I do? And I kind of broke the tradition, and a couple of people up there in Beaufort got a little annoyed with me. I said, I want to do a hands-on with the kids during the Christmas week. So this is what I did. I built this thing, and what I'll do is in two parts. I'm going to talk about how I designed and built it, and then Lloyd will do his presentation, and then I'll set this up so I can actually show you what it was like. Okay? So the idea of trying to get these kids engaged, to want to run trains, the first thing was I had to come up with a question or a way to invite them in. And the question was, would you like to run a train? I found that to be extremely effective in getting their attention, getting mom and dad's attention, getting grandma and grandpa's attention. Would you like to drive a train? And it's like, invariably, the answer is, yeah, sure. How do I do that? So that began to form in my mind what was it going to be like to sit down and work with a kid or a parent and show them something about model railroading. They could see the trains running around on these other displays. They could talk about the cars and the trains, but what was going to get them to work hands-on? So I said, okay, I knew about John Allen's time saver. What was it? Alan Wright had one called the Ingle Nook. And then there was Lynn Westcott, he had the Switching Nightmare. And they were all compact switching layouts. And the idea was that in a small amount of space, try switching these cars, delivering cars to industries. I liked the concept, but I didn't like what they had. John Allen and Lynn Westcott built it for competition. They would go to train shows and they would have two identical modules side by side, set up the same way, and have two people try to solve those switching problems in the least amount of time. That didn't seem to me to be a way that was going to be successful in engaging kids. Okay, so no, it's got to be simpler than that. Well, based upon my experience in learning to model, to operate on my friend's lab, Jim Grill, I realized that all I really needed was a piece of mainline track, a siding, a runaround, and some sidings. So it took a while, but this is the track plan that emerged, what I'm talking about. So the track plan. I started the track plan out in O scale because I thought O scale is big enough where the kids are going to be able to see the
They can handle it. Yeah.
They can handle it, the weight, it has some gravitas. So I laid it out a 27 track on my living room floor, and I took out some engines and started playing with them. And I realized, Lionel, you've got that E unit that's got that fourth cycle thing. It's forward, neutral, reverse, and neutral. Well, if you're trying to show somebody how to switch, that's not going to work. That was a terrible thing. So I rolled the O-scale stuff away. Now I'm an N-scale. I love N-scale. I got 91 feet of mainline track in New Jersey. too small for kids. And bump the table and they knocked off the track. So HO was the compromise. So the plan was to have a simple runaround. I really wanted a longer runaround to be able to put 4 or 5 cars on it. But I also wanted to have a tail track that the locomotive and a couple of cars could move on. Well, when I got my HO track laid out on the living room floor, it turned out it was about 16 feet long. So I was like, that's not gonna work, because when I get done building whatever it is that I build, this has to live someplace.
It also has to be transported.
So the limitation was, I have a bookcase upstairs in my workroom that's 8.5 feet long. So it was like, okay, what can I put in 8.5 feet? Because when this thing is done, it's gonna live on top of the bookcase. So 8.5 feet would have given me what you see here, plus about another 6 inches. I decided to not go with 8 foot 6 inches because the lumber comes in 8 foot or 10 foot. And for the difference of about another $3, I was like, not gonna do that. This is gonna simplify things. One more factor which I checked, which I'm glad I did, my car can handle an 8 foot layout. It can't handle 8 foot 6. It's like, I'm not gonna be driving around the back of the hatch open. So 8 foot was the limitation, and you can see the compromise was one tail track is longer than the other. That one over there can just barely hold the locomotive. Okay, if an RS3 can sit on it, you know, an S2 or an S4, it's no problem. But an RS3 was that's the maximum capacity. So it's like, how am I going to show anybody how to run a railroad if I can't, you know, have an effective tail track? Well, the thought was, if I had to, I could easily cut, you know, put a wing on it, which still might happen. But the idea was, let's see what I can do with 8 feet. So the track plan, you know, kind of formulated, this kind of worked out. The next decision was what track, because I could have plenty of atlas track, you know, what do you call it, sectional track. I had some HO flex track, whatever. I settled on the easy track for 2 reasons. I had some of it from a layout I had helped to build, plus I have an HO on the shelf around the room layout in my shed. So I had some of that left over. It was quick, it was easy to put together. I know that the turnouts are reliable, and I was not as certain with my skill putting together flex track and you know, putting turnouts together. I wanted these things to be able to operate with no problem, and I knew that the Bachman stuff was reliable. So the problem is, the drawback is that you're stuck with a certain geometry. I wanted to put a mine over here with 4 tracks, but because of their turnout geometry, can't do it. So yeah, it took a while to develop. So once I decided on the scale and the track, this cost a little bit more than I wanted to put into it. You know, I had to buy the turnouts on eBay, and as long as you stay out of Somerville, you know, you can actually walk out with a little bit of cash left in your pocket. The possibility exists that I can make another module like this, and I can next year cut this out and, you know, have a second yard or something in another module. But there were some other things I had to consider. The next thing was, okay, actually the materials. I used 1x4, which was more than I really wanted. But you'll notice that over here, I left enough space so that if anybody should actually reach over and knock over a boxcar or locomotive, it would fall alongside the track, and it wouldn't fall outside, it wouldn't fall over. So I made this to be self-contained, okay? Also, if I had enough room, I could put a control panel or a power pack here if I wanted to. As it turned out, this layout, I was, you know, put it together on the living room floor a couple of times. I was happy with it. I operated it manually at first with the turnouts. And then when I was finalized on it, I said, okay, now I'm going to build the actual box. So what I did was, I started out with corner brackets, 3/4 inch screws in the corners to make sure they were square. As far as supporting, I knew I was gonna use foam and not plywood, because plywood's too heavy, and this has to be something I can bring upstairs. So I was gonna use foam board, and rather than try to put, just cross pieces, or put in lateral, 2 long ones, I wasn't sure how the foam board was gonna stay. I didn't know if it was gonna sag or not, so I decided to build this, what I call like a fish spine, So that way, I also had the chance to put these secondary pieces wherever I needed to avoid where the turnout wires are going to drop through. So I had some flexibility. When I put it together, I glued all these pieces together to the supporting outside edges, and then I came through with a staple gun and with an air compressor, put in 1.5-inch staples. So it looks kind of lightweight and flimsy, but it's really it's got some mass. Then I had to figure out the wiring. The wiring for the turnouts, Bachmann puts these very expensive little connectors on their turnouts. And I really hate cutting stuff like that off, because I'm left with 3 little tiny wires that I've got to go and separate and then strip and tin and solder and that kind of stuff. So I decided to leave the turnout wires intact. Turns out that if you buy thermostat wire from Lowe's, 3-wire thermostat wire, I think it's 18 gauge, and you strip off the ends, you can make a little fan that fits right into that connector. So instead of paying like $20 for a 10-foot section of Bachmann extension wire, you can pay $20 for 50 feet of thermostat wire and wire to your heart's content.